Why don't black folk say our exceptionality is that we are different from all these groups you're trying to put us into? So how can you let somebody put you in a bag with all these other groups when they don't have the experiences you have and have been treated the way you've been treated? At some point, your exceptionality should be brought up and should be dignified. That you were the first in all these things. You were the first people. You were the first Jews. You're the first human beings on earth. You're different. Exceptionality. And I want you to, and all these marches that you have, I want you to start marching towards exceptionality. And so we're going to get into that. But first, let me say, I don't want to deviate from what is customary that I do whenever I come to one of these occasions. That is to try to give you a status report on black people in America. And let me tell you up front, you are not progressing. I've been telling you that now for 25 to 30 years, even when I was with the Carter administration going around the country. You're not going to progress. You're going backwards. You're going backwards. The only people, blacks in America, are progressing are those who are locked into a vein called entertainers. If you're an entertainer, what you're telling white folk is that you are safe as a birth control pill. There ain't nothing going to happen. You're not going to do anything for black folk. If you're running with a ball, joking, telling jokes, singing, dancing, that's safe. White folk, that doesn't frighten white folk. They'll give you a television show. They'll put you on 10 television shows. They'll make you a host of a television show. They'll let you broadcast every sport event. As long as you don't address any issues dealing with black folk and the problems that black folk have. And so when you all see all these blacks on television, read about them in the newspaper, those blacks have been classified as being as 20 times safer than the birth control pill. There ain't nothing going to happen for black folk. And so this morning, I want to let you know that you are not progressing. You're not progressing. And first and foremostly, social integration has failed. Get that through your head. Social integration has failed. As a matter of fact, you lost in social integration. You didn't gain anything. You lost everything you had. Any black person here in this auditorium today that's more than 50 years of age can tell you what you used to have. You have nothing now. You used to have theaters and bus companies, cab companies. You used to have almost everything that whites had. But now you have nothing. Why? Because, see, social integration is a weakening process. It is not designed to empower you. Powernomics might be, but social integration is not. You cannot integrate anything you cannot empower anything by integrating it. You weaken it. And in social integration in this country, what social integration did was make you a guest. You became a guest in what other people own and control. And any of you know that once your guest has been with you for 2 or 3 days, you want to get rid of him. We are guests. You don't own any hotels. You don't own anything of value in the country. That's why everybody's been pushing social integration. That's why you no longer have communities. You used to have decent communities. In every black city in America, I used to be able to go to any city and find a black neighborhood, not a neighborhood, those days, communities. You used to have some of the finest communities in America right here in LA. You had a Compton, you had a Inglewood, you had a Watts, you had a South Central, you had something. You got nothing now.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I hope you're doing fine, wherever you are today. As you know, this is your presenter, Eugene Stories, and I'm hoping that you're great from wherever you're watching us from. Now, Dr. Cloud Anderson, really an important speaker today in this podcast. And there is something that he shares to the black community that I feel like every youth, every person, every young adult person should watch this video. And I think we're starting to think in a different way because comparatively with other communities or other, communities, it's true, we are still not doing much for ourselves. That's according to Dr. Cloud Anderson. And he says that if black people will only depend on social integration and not economic integration, there is a problem that will come because black folks need a combination of two, social and economic integration. That's what I believe it's important. And in this video, we are going to discuss that. And before just jumping right into the video, I hope you get value from the videos that I always share with you. I hope you see the value in it all. Now, as you know, Dr. Cloud Anderson has long argued that black people must prioritize economic empowerment and group unity if they want to achieve the true independence and power in society. In his works, such as Powernomics, he has emphasized that social integration without economic integration has been a disaster for the longest time for black communities, while other racial and ethnic groups maintain economic solidarity. circulate wealth within their own communities, and control key industries, black people have largely been left dependent on external systems that do not serve their best interest. Without a shift in mindset and strategy, black communities risk economic and social destruction. In short, it's trying to say that black people will be wiped out if they don't have social and economic integration. Social integration, it's not enough if we are not economically integrated. We need to make our own money circulate within the black community. If I'm your brother, I need to buy in your shop, you need to buy in my shop, we need to support each other. Now, I don't want to say much because most of the important things are being said by the professor, Dr. Cloud Anderson. Props to him for showing this video to us. And sorry, it was an audio version. I couldn't find the video version. But all in all, still the video is still important. The audio is still important. The most important thing is the message. So watch this video. Let me come back and we'll have a great discussion in regards to this, because I feel like sometimes we as black folks, we need to call ourselves out and we need to talk about these things. Watch the video. I'll be back.
And all my blacks who were so silly enough, they moved out of the city up into the mountains and said, I'm getting away from all those people. I'm going to go up in the mountain by myself. And you turn over the city to the people you're competing against. Social integration cannot enhance you. Now, anybody in social economics knows this. The Jews found this out way back a long time ago, in the 1500s in Europe, when Jews tried to socially integrate. And Jews found out very quickly it is a weakening process. They became at risk. No group is going to try to socially integrate that's an out group. And especially if you're an out group, that's a hated group. You are a hated out group. You've always been a hated out group. And then why would you go divide yourself up, splinter yourself, and just scatter yourselves and think that somehow you're progressing? And see, that's why you don't see any other group in this country trying to socially integrate except black folk. You have not seen any integration marches from the Asians. What Asians have been trying to socially integrate? What Arabs have been trying to integrate? What American Indians are coming off the reservations trying to integrate? Nobody wants to integrate but black folk. That is a form of social economic suicide. But we do it. And they've been doing it now for all these years. And back during the 1960s, I told them all, you're going the wrong way. You're going the wrong way. Pushing social integration in this country. I'm saying you're going the wrong way. They said, well, Dr. Anderson, you're a radical. I don't mind being a radical. Because see, radical is just the opposite of superficial. If you're superficial, means you're just dealing with anything minute, non-irrelevant, wheel spinning, non-frictional kind of activities. Radical means you got a problem that's very desperately bad. And you got to do, that's what you call radical surgery. You got to cut something out and stop it. And so when people call me a radical, I said, fine. And so I don't mind being a radical. Just like somebody was telling me, I don't mind being a racist. A racist signifies power, which I'm going to talk about a few minutes ago. People say, you're a racist? I would love to be a racist so I can have some power. But anyway, so social integration just cut us down. And in terms of what it's done to us, your poverty rate hasn't improved. It hasn't improved. Right now, 38% to almost 40% of all the black people in America are beneath the poverty line. Almost 40% of all the blacks in America beneath the poverty line. You got about another 33% that's right on the border of going into the poverty category. If you were to take away their house, a little bit of money in investment, a little bit of money in a car, they go beneath the poverty line. And then you would have 2/3 of all the blacks in America would be poverty stricken. Now, black children right now across America, about 35% of all black children are in poverty. The wealth gap is also decreasing. The wealth gap between whites and blacks is decreasing. About 1985, when Ronald Reagan came into office, in about third year he'd been in office, guess what? The gap jumped up 3 times, where we picked up something like about over 300% increase in whites in America became millionaires and billionaires in a 3-year period between 1982 and 1986. And at the same time, the gap between poor blacks and middle class blacks began to widen. You're not getting any better. In slavery, you had 1/2 of 1% of the wealth. And we only had 200-some thousand blacks that were free out of 4.5 million. And here you are 150 years later in the richest country on earth, and you still own 1/2 of 1% after 150 years. And everybody running their mouth about we're progressive. Watch all these civil rights leaders talk that crap. How we're progressive. Where are you progressive? Show it to me. Show me the progress. You haven't got a pot or a window to throw it out of. And talking about we're progressing. They look through the mirror of a car and look and see, looking in the reverse. They think they're going in reverse, but in fact, they have been in reverse. We're not progressing in this country. We're going backwards. Right now, the unemployment rate has not changed. What you're hearing now in the news about, well, the economy is getting better. They are not talking about black folk. They talk about the economy improving. I don't care whether you got an economic boom or depression or recession. Black folk are outside and underneath the economy. It doesn't make any difference. Nothing's going to change for you. Now I hear a lot of my civil rights leaders say, but yeah, Dr. Anderson, but a rising tide will lift all boats. Yeah, fool, is have to accept the boat that's got a hole in it as concreted to the bottom. It's going to stay underneath the water. And so what happens? Our unemployment rate, even when Obama came to office, nationally, it was 35%. In Detroit, Michigan, it was 48%. In Baltimore, it's 48%. Also, and in Pittsburgh, 49%, in New York, 52% for black folk. Over half of the black folk in America right now are unemployed. They're not going to tell you that. It's called a structural unemployment rate. See, the only people reporting as being unemployed are those who are either searching for a job in the job market or they're collecting unemployment compensation. The rest of them have dropped out of the system. They're sitting on the corner someplace. Someplace in this town I can go find them sitting down on the curb, laying in the alleys, sleeping in garages. They're no longer looking for jobs. The unemployment rate is not changing. It's staying the same and getting worse. The same thing also happened in terms of things like imprisonment. Your imprisonment of blacks are still going to prison in massive numbers. You came out of slavery. Over 50% of all the black people who were free in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War, in prison, there was somewhere around 50% of all prisoners in the United States, in Atlanta, Savannah, New York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Buffalo. Over 50% of all the prisoners were blacks, and you only had about 207,000 blacks who were free. Yet you made up over 50% of all the prisoners. You now still make up over 51% of all the prisoners in the United States. So you're not progressing any place. Now all this means what to us? It means that black folk don't have the wherewithal to be a competitive people. To be a competitive people, the first thing you must do is have some wealth. You must have some wealth. And you came out of slavery in 1860. You had 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth, the richest nation on the earth. You still have 1/2 of 1%. It is wealth power that dictates your opportunities in our society. It is wealth power that teaches you what you can do and what you can't do. Forget about civil rights and social integration. You try going down to the Ritz-Carlton tonight and tell them, I want one of those $1,000 room nights, one of those hotel rooms tonight. Give me a $1,000 room. And I want lobster and everything, every 20 minutes of steaks, filet mignons. And they say, how are you going to pay for it? You say, I'm going to pay for it through civil rights and social integration. And they'll probably throw you off the top floor of the building. What decides your opportunity in the society is what you own and control. That's the bottom line of it. Now, what's happening in all the urban cities across America is that you got a process in place right now in urban redevelopment. They're using 5 techniques that totally wipe you out. One is called gentrification. They're going into all these major cities that used to be majority black populated cities, and they are erasing you. In places like Detroit, Michigan, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. used to be the chocolate city. When I went there with President Carter in 1976, at that time, Washington, D.C. was 78% black. Now it's down to about 42% black. Wow. Chocolate City is gone. Detroit, Michigan is going to be totally wiped out by immigrants pouring into the society. Since 1970 up to now, we've had 45 million immigrants coming to the United States. They came in over you, and they're displacing you. And then the second term they use besides gentrification to wipe you out is a thing they call privatization. You go into Detroit, Michigan, as they gentrify, they're going to take all the public resources and things that should be owned by the public, they're going to place them through privatization to the hands of the wealthy whites. Whites are going to buy your golf courses, your subway systems, your bridges, your tunnels. They're going to control your airports, your parks, your museums. Why? Again, because Anderson says, he who owns and controls the resources got the power. If you own and control nothing, you are totally, absolutely useless and expendable. And that's why nothing has changed for us, because we don't understand the system of gentrification and privatization. The other thing they're using to wipe you out in those cities is called metropolitan forms of government, where now they're going to do regional form of government, which means that the whites in the suburbs can come into those black cities and set up some kind of consortium that control what goes on inside those cities so they can extract the resources out of them. Another concept they use in those cities is called cool cities, which says cool cities means bring in the gays and let them replace black folk. And that's the fourth scheme they use on you. And in Detroit, Michigan, using that as an example again, the governor there has already set up in movement a system where he wants to go to the President of the United States, Obama, and ask him for a green card system where he can start importing Chinese from China to make Detroit, Michigan the biggest Chinatown in the United States. Even though that city had a 90% black population, they're going to bury blacks in Detroit, Michigan, underneath Asians coming into Detroit. And already in Detroit, Michigan, in Dearborn, right on the outskirts of Detroit, Arabs own 90%. 90% of all the businesses in the city of Detroit are owned by Arabs. Arabs and 90% black population must go to the Arabs to get what they want in terms of food, medicine, clothing, because they own they own out of the gas stations. You got 146 gas stations in Detroit, Michigan. Arabs now own 144 in a black city. Blacks own 2 gas stations out of 146. You own nothing. The rest, the hotels are owned, and the 7-Elevens are owned by Indians. Asians are owning the laundries. The laundries, they're owning the hair and wig shops, the nail shops. Blacks own nothing in a 90% black city. And that's why now Detroit went into poverty. That's why it was declared bankrupt, because blacks had money. Blacks had about 11 or 12 billion a year annual disposable amount of money passing through their hands. They were going out to the suburbs, spending it in the suburbs, and spending it with the Arabs and the Asians, the Hispanics, and everybody else. And when I tried to put in a plan there for black folk, they said it was racist for me to try to help black folk. They said, yes, Dr. Anderson, we admit in this town that we have an Asian town, a Chinatown, a Pole town, a hockey town, a Cork town, a Mexican town, and a Greek town, but it's racist for you to try to do something for black folk, to build a black town. And guess what the black leadership said? They sure is right. And if you want to find out if I'm telling a lie or not, you got blacks sitting right in this auditorium that was there. You got right here on the front row, 2 here, you got Rosie Milligan that was there and spoke in Detroit. And I had over 1,000 blacks come across America and say, we will move and relocate our business to Detroit to build a black community, a black business district. We'll move our businesses into Detroit. Over 1,000 of them. And guess what? The town got scared and fighting. And they told black folks, no, we don't. It's racist for Anderson to come in and not include everybody and everything. And so that ended that effort. And so that's why Detroit failed. So what I'm saying to you is anything that's happened to black folk in this country can continue to happen, but it is not by accident. You all have to understand today that you're locked into a social construct. That social construct was put in place almost 300 and 400 years ago. You're locked and boxed. You're locked and boxed. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you that nobody else tells you. You're locked and boxed because of the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. You're locked and boxed. We got black leaders who can't figure that out. You go read the Constitution, it tells you straight up front what's going to happen to black folk. You're locked into it. That is a social construct that says in this country, that in the Constitution, which was approved in 1789, it says that this is a white nation. The first immigration law in 1791 spelled it out. It is a white nation for white Europeans and other white people classified as white. And black folk are now going to be a permanent underclass. Not a permanent class, they will be an underclass. You will be classified as 3/5 of a human being. You will be classified as property. You will be classified as property and 3/5 of a human being. You would not be permitted to do things that everybody else could be permitted to do. And in the Constitution, it's spelled out, and black folk don't know this. The people in New York, in Philadelphia, met for a whole week. They closed all the windows and all the doors and put up guards when they drafted the Constitution and said, don't let anybody in. We don't want anybody to hear this. We got to decide how are we going to enslave all these black folk and use them without the public knowing it, while we craft a document that says all people are free. We're going to enslave these. That was done a week before the Constitutional Convention started in the late 1700s. And what they decided to do, and all of them participated, including Jefferson and Madison and all of them, when they wrote up the Constitution, was this. They said, whenever we talk in those documents about all the people, we are not talking about black folk. When they say we the people, that's white folk. All the people, that's white folk. When you talk about the black people, you use very broad and ambiguous terms that nobody can understand. They develop a code into the construct. The code was those people meant blacks. Those who are abundant, black folk. Those who are indebted, black folk. The unhappy lot, black folk. And you look at those documents, whenever it say use those terms, they were talking about black people. Whenever you use the very specific terms like we the people, all the people, you're talking about white people. And so when you read the document, it says that that all people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of what? That's a lie. It wasn't happiness. It was property. It was property, and they changed it in the second writing. They demanded that it be changed from property, because black folk were the property. They were coming pursuing black folk. And they changed it and put in happiness. Anybody that got past a third grade education would have figured that out and say, well, hold a second. White folk aren't that dumb. Why would white folk go across the Atlantic Ocean on a 3-month voyage at the risk of their lives to come to the United States looking for happiness? They didn't come here looking for happiness. They came here looking for what they call the American dream. And so what I'm going to talk about now is to clear up all the debris and all the garbage, because you all cannot save yourselves unless you get rid of all the garbage off the table, get rid of all the trash. And when they start talking about the American dream did not include you. The American dream was 2 things. It was coming to America, getting free land and free black labor. That was the American dream. To come to America and get unearned benefits if you were an immigrant. The person that couldn't come was black folk, and they put a 0 quota on black folk coming. And when you hear these people bragging about the American dream, don't be misled. They're not talking about you. You were the part of the dream. You can't get it because you were part of it. And all these people coming to America right now, they're still coming here talking about the American dream. Now, even though they can't get the free land anymore, or not all the free labor, they are coming here getting those free unearned benefits. Slavery was unearned benefits. Whites didn't have to work to get benefits during slavery. All they had to do was own a black person or own black folk and get free benefits. That's why when slavery ended, they created Wall Street, where now you go invest in stocks and get unearned benefits. 87% of all the money in the country that's generated, that people live off, whites live off in this country, comes from unearned labor. They don't work for it. They push paper around and numbers around and get 87% of the wealth in the nation. Wall Street replaced the back of a black slave. That's what unearned benefits mean when they start talking about how did you get your wealth and power. 87% of what whites get every year for earnings, they get it from unearned benefits such as stocks in a company, stocks on Wall Street, stock equity in a corporation. They get it from rental income. They get it from tax refund, dividends, all kind of abatements. They get that free. They don't earn it. But they want black folk to go out and work and sweat and earn your income, talking about you can't get the free welfare, food stamps, where they get all the benefits that are unearned. And so consequently, unless you understand these things, we can't make it. Now let me get rid of some of the debris before I get into what I'm going to talk about today. I didn't get into it yet. Let me make sure y'all understand this. The first thing you have to understand before you can do some serious stuff in this country and in this city, understand what racism is. Racism is not what you've been hearing all these years. About racism is whether or not you like somebody, whether or not you can get along with them, whether or not you're prejudiced, bigoted, or biased. That has nothing in the world to do with racism. Please stop your friends from getting in your ear talking about racism because you don't like somebody, or because he said something to you individually, or because he fired this black person. That is not racism. Racism is a group concept. Racism does not exist unless you're dealing on a group-to-group basis. You cannot have racism on a group to an individual basis. It doesn't exist. A white person can't do anything to me personally based on racism. It has to be against my group. He can personally be against me for personal reasons, but his personal preference or his personal bias or his personal bigotry, that is not racism. Racism is a group concept. Secondly, it is based on economics. It's economics. It had nothing to do with social. Racism never existed on this earth until the early 1500s, about 1503. And it came out as a direct result because of blacks being enslaved. See, back about 1442, as an example, you had Henry the Navigator that went around the coast of Africa and pulled up about 16 blacks and took them back to Italy and gave them to the Pope as slaves. The Pope then, in about 1442, used those blacks in the Pope's residence and in the Vatican. Says, boy, it's good to have some black slaves around here. If anybody wants to have some free labor, get yourself some black slaves. Now, here come Columbus a few years later and supposedly discovered America. When he discovered America and went back to Europe, and when he went back to Europe in the early 1500s, Europe was being wiped out. They were suffering from all kind of diseases, famine, starvation, crime. Europe was in the bottom. Europe was getting wiped totally out from diseases, food famines, and everything else you can think of. And they said, we got to do something to rebuild the European continent. And somebody says, well, look, Columbus just discovered America. He got all these, and got all that free land over there. And now we found out we can use black labor. Why don't we start using these blacks to build wealth and power in North America, Central America, and South America? And when they did that, 9 nations said, that's a good idea. And now when they said that, all of them got into a contest, a race, to try to get to America, to develop it for wealth. They got into a contest. The nations started competing for wealth. And that's where the racism came from. Racism, then, these nations were trying to pick up different parts of the Americas and use black labor to really be able to build wealth and power for their home nations. That is racism. And it was based on economics. It started about 1503. Now, I want you to understand what racism is. It is a competitive relationship between groups of people that are competing for the ownership and control of resources, wealth, and power. That is racism. Again, make sure you understand it. Racism is a group-based phenomenon. It's economic-based. It's when groups are competing for the ownership and control of resources, power, and wealth, and to be able to use it to benefit their people. And once they get enough of it, then they can shut somebody else down. They can enslave another group, Jim Crow segregate them, or do anything they want to them. That is racism. No black person can be a racist. It is impossible in theory and practice for a black person to be a racist in America. You cannot be. There's no way you can be. And quit letting people call you a racist because you speak up for your own people. You can't be a racist. Where do you have enough power and wealth and resources to tell white folk who they can marry, where they can live, and what businesses they can own and control? No black person can do that. They said, well, Dr. Answer, we got with Malcolm X and Farrakhan, what they're racist. No, they weren't racist. Any black person that speaks out in behalf of his own people is not a racist. He is reacting to white racism. All a black person can do is to react to white racism. He cannot be a racist. That's why I get very concerned. I hear people talking about, well, Dr. Hanson, we got reverse racism. Yeah, how you get reverse? Well, he's talking bad about us. He's supposed to. He's reacting to what you're doing to him. You've been beating a man to death and talking about, well, he doesn't want me to beat him anymore. He's a real racist. Well, it's a reverse discrimination. And how to get to be reverse discrimination? Well, you can't. Let me tell you something. You cannot have reverse discrimination unless you got forward discrimination. If I pull a car into a garage, in front of the garage, and park the car on your foot, and while the car is in forward gear, and I start screaming in pain, say, get it off my foot. They said, well, Dr. Hanson, for me to put it in reverse and back it up, that's reverse backup, but that's reverse discrimination. So it's best for us to leave it where it is on your foot. It's stupid stuff. But black folk go along with it, you see? Well, Dr. Hanson, we won't be caught be talking about reverse discrimination. Hell, if it's on your foot, you get it off. I don't care what you call it, but my people are scared. They'll tell me, well, wait, I might as well let it stay on there, child. It'll be okay. God will make a way. Y'all understand what I'm saying? And so, and they scared to stand up and say no. And so what they've done now is set up a social construct and locked you into being 3/5 of a human being and being property. Now, and guess what? Then they wrote the Constitution. No black leaders make this point. We got two constitutions in the United States. We got the first one that was written and codified in 1789, and we got another one in the 1860s. The first Constitution was an affirmative action plan. It is an affirmative action plan for whites. You hear white folk always talking about they're against affirmative action plans. They're only against affirmative action plan for you. Why? You see, because I wrote the other affirmative action plan. I wrote it in 1970 when I was overseeing the education system for Florida. I did not write an affirmative action plan for everybody. I wrote that plan for black people. I did not write that plan for minorities and poor folk and people of color, midgets, humpback, lesbians. I wrote it for black folk. Why? Because, see, affirmative action was supposed to be corrective action. Correcting something that the system and that the government has done consciously, historically, and continuously against a very specific group of people. That's what affirmative action is. Then why in the world do you all keep letting people put you in a bag called minority? No government hasn't done anything in the minorities. Why are you letting them put in there, comparing you and equating you to gays? And well, now they're getting all the benefits. And Hispanics weren't even in the country. Now, when you go to the affirmative action plan, guess what? I got Eskimos in the affirmative action plan. Where did Eskimos pick cotton? They had nothing in the world to do with affirmative action. The government hasn't done anything to them. And you go into affirmative action program, the affirmative action program has been totally corrupted. The only people that should have been on the affirmative action plan in the first place were black folk. Because those are the only people that the government done some things to specifically exploit, misuse, abuse, subordinate, enslave, Jim Crow segregate, castrate, lynch, and do it and deny them education. Only black people. And you gotta go look at the affirmative action plan, they got everything in there except your dog from the neighbor's yard. And I don't see any blacks speaking up about it. They'll go right down there and call, well, I'm a minority. How the hell you get to be a minority? What's a minority? I don't know what it is, Dr. Ennis, but I know I'm one. Because they call me one. And then leaving that point, I'm telling you, it is illegal and unconstitutional for you to equate anything to black folk in this country and make them equal. There's no constitutional basis to have any Asians, Arabs, Hispanics, women, gays in affirmative action programs or preferential programs. It is illegal, but I haven't seen one black person, not one black person, go to court and raise hell about it. As a matter of fact, I have whites that tell me that they were totally, absolutely surprised that when they started doing that no blacks spoke up and raised Cain about it. They just sat there and let it go down. That's why back in 1970, with the affirmative action plan, When I wrote that plan, they turned around immediately and came up with a thing called Title IX. Because throughout history, every time you try to do something for black folk, they would throw other groups in there to water it down and dilute it and give it to everybody so blacks wouldn't be anything left for black folk. And they come up with Title IX. How are you going to spend those money now since we dictated for black people and they got Title IX? Every county, all 67 of the letter back says any money comes out here, we're giving it to women. Not a penny would go to black folk. No black folk raised Cain. None of them said anything. They went down like that. That's what happened to your money. Because you see, and guess what it's backed by? It's backed by the United States Supreme Court. One of the most racist organizations in America. One of the most racist institutions in America is the United States Supreme Court. And I still cease with a total, absolute amazement as to why black folk keep going to the court system. It doesn't make any sense. The deck is stacked by the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court has never ever done anything in benefit black folk. Never. And they aren't going to do it. You've had the first 57 to 58 people appointed as justice to the United States Supreme Court were slave owners. And everything subsequent to the 1860s, they were either white racists or people who were totally indifferent to black folk. They're one of those two even to the present time. They're either racist, closet racist, or they're totally indifferent to black folk. They don't care about black folk. And what they've done is to make sure that the social construct, what was set up in the Constitution about your being property and 3/5 of a human being and non-competitive, will stay in existence. The guardians of racism in America is the United States Supreme Court. That's why when the second Constitution was written in the 1860s, and you had a few liberal whites, radical Republicans those days said, we got to correct some of these things that's going on. And they crafted the second Constitution. The second Constitution was made up of the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. And they also passed two civil rights laws, the 1865 and 1866 civil rights laws. They passed those laws all for black folk, newly freed slaves. They passed it for newly freed slaves. The Supreme Court jumped in immediately. And they used that same little schemes they use today. The first thing they did was say that all those civil rights laws that were passed from 1865 all the way up to the 1880, late 18, about 1889, all those civil rights laws were unconstitutional. Nobody gave them authority to do that. The United States Supreme Court does not have the authority to do what it's doing to you all right now. It doesn't even have the authority. But you don't see that black, you got all these black with law degrees. You see one raising hell about it? The United States Supreme Court does not have the authority to mess over you the way they're messing over you. That's why they've never done anything in your favor. They don't have that authority. Congress is the person that sets the rules and law. They are the elected bodies. Nobody elects anybody to the United States Supreme Court. They're the closest thing to royalty in this country, where they get a lifetime job to do nothing but sit there and mess with people based on their own personal prejudices and get away with it because nobody raises Cain about it. They don't have the authority. And so, but they didn't do anything after the Marlboro and Madison case back in 1803. Then here, jump up to 1857, and here comes a case called Dred Scott. In the Dred Scott case, a black man then was trying to get his freedom, having moved from Missouri to Illinois, and the Supreme Court, and went to the Supreme Court. And Justice Taney ruled in that, being the Chief Justice, says that in the final ruling in the Dred Scott decision in 1857, it said a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. That case, that issue has never been overruled. Well, are black folk progressing in America? No, you're not progressing. That's why they're shooting you down. That's why they're shooting down a black man every other week in some place in the United States, or beating a black woman. These are just the police alone. Dragging you out of cars, beating black women on the street, shooting black men. Why? Because the Dred Scott decision is still in effect. It's still in effect. That you have no rights because the decision was never addressed. And the real sadness and irony of this, and I look in the newspaper, I look on TV, and here comes my people down the road. Guess what they're doing? Wearing signs, hollering, yelling, screaming, and saying on the signs, Black Lives Matter. They never ask the question, Black Lives Matter to whom? To whom? I look on TV every day, and there they are walking with signs, Black Lives Matter. They never say, to whom does it matter? You got a law saying you don't matter. And more importantly, if you understand the nature of the system, you would know that you don't matter. Why? Because you see, in American society and in a capitalistic society, value of life is based on what we call personal net worth. When you go to a bank, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to fill out what? A personal net worth statement. Net worth means what are you worth? That's why you hear people saying all the time, John D. Rockefeller is worth. Henry Ford is worth. Bill Gates is worth. They're telling you that value is what you're worth is based on what? What you own and control. And since in black folk we only control less than 1% or 2% of anything, that's why whites say we aren't worth 2 cents. Because we don't control anything. We control less than 1.5 or 1%. How in the world can you justify people been in the country for 500 years and can't even control 1% of something? It's because of the social construct you're locked into. You're locked into it, bottomed up. And how did that come about with capitalism? Let's go back to what I said a few minutes ago. When they decided to build racism in by commercializing black folk into slavery. They commercialized black folk in Europe and started that race. And when the race ended, and they maldistributed all the wealth, they took the E off of race and stuck ISM. ISM means is a suffix which says maintain the prevailing conditions. If whites had used slavery to acquire almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, resource, privileges, controls of all levels of government into the hands of the white society, racism means let nothing change that condition. That's what you're locked into. Racism means, as a group phenomenon, whites own and control almost 100% of everything of value in the society. 87% is frozen. 87% of everything in society that's owned right now by whites is frozen. It is locked into their communities, locked in their businesses, locked in their culture, locked in their neighborhoods, locked in their schools, locked in their churches. 87% is frozen. You can't get it. That means that the average white child, he now has an 87% advantage over a black child. Because everything that a white child needs to be successful in this society is in his community, in his church, in his business, in his neighborhood, in his schools, in his family, in his culture. He can get it anytime he wants to. He inherits it. It is passed on from one generation to the next. Every child gets what he needs at birth. Now, the disadvantage for these black children is that you have never owned anything and never controlled anything. And what you can pass on is what you cannot inherit. Because you see, all of our black leadership have had us focusing on things that are non-inheritable. You cannot inherit food stamps. You cannot inherit public housing. You can't inherit a job. Every time I go to a civil rights organization, I say, what are you doing to enrich black folk and give them something to pass on to their children? They say, well, we're going to try to get blacks some jobs. How are you going to pass on a job to a black child? Why don't you build some businesses with stock, equity, and wealth and pass that on to them? Now, what we're going to do now, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to flip the switch. Flip the switch, power up under Powernomics principles. I'm going to give it to you again. We're going to have to flip the social economic switch and start learning how to power up under Powernomics principles. Now, how they get away with these things while we can't do anything is because we're not playing the game to win. We're not playing the game to win. The bottom line is this: if you're going to play the game to win, you must understand those Powernomics principles in those books. The first thing you must do, you're going to have to go vertical, straight up and down. Everything must be vertical because racism is vertical. Racism is not horizontal. It goes from the top to the bottom. Anything that's horizontal, stay away from it. Do not get involved in anything that is horizontal. That's a total, absolute waste of time. I know a lot of my friends want to get involved in horizontal issues. Anything that applies to everybody around the world is horizontal. Anything that applies to everybody around the world is horizontal. I got a lot of friends that get involved in religion. Religion is a horizontal issue. Anybody can belong to any religion, any place, anytime they want to. That is not a vertical issue. And if you're black and you get involved and your primary issue becomes religion, then what happens is that the only people that benefit is only where those two issues will cross. Where vertical cross the horizontal, those people right behind it would benefit. And that's why I tell people up front, I don't care what religion a black person belongs to. He is my friend and member of my group. I don't get into the religious aspects of anything. I don't care whether you want to be a Mormon or Hare Krishna or you want to practice Hinduism, Buddhism, anything you want. That doesn't about, I don't get into that. Sexism, that is a horizontal issue. I got all these guys always, they want to fight for women for this around the world. Women in Iran can't drive cars. That ain't my problem. That's not my problem. And I don't want that to be black folks' problem. That's between her and those people over there. Let them resolve that. I want the poorest people on the earth to start prioritizing, quit majoring in the minors, digging in the minutia, getting involved in non-frictional wheel-spinning activities that cannot lift you up. They say, well, Dr. Evans, how about the gays? We got to do something for the gays. That ain't my issue. As far as I'm concerned, the gays can stay in the closet. You can go back in the closet and lock the door behind you. That's not my problem. I'm not interested in, I'm going to give you my approval to who you want to go to bed with and who you want to screw at night. That's not my issue. Don't equate that, and I'm offended if you equate that to black folk. That is not the same as being black. But so you stay away from those issues and say, no, if they don't have to come out of the closet. Gays should go do what they want to do and do their own thing. But they want to come out publicly and want blacks to identify with them and support them. And I got all these liberal and civil rights movements. They can't wait to get involved in the gay issues. From the White House down, that's all they talk about is gayness this, gayness that. Congratulations, you're a transsexual. Who cares? That's had nothing to do with black folk. The 500 years of suffering that black folk went through was not because of being whether or not they were gay. Some of the biggest slave owners in this country were gays. If I go down to New Orleans right now, you got a restaurant called the Two Sisters Restaurant in New Orleans. The Two Sisters Restaurant is still in existence in New Orleans. That was owned by two gay white women doing slavery. They were the biggest slave holders in New Orleans, and they were gay. And this restaurant still exists. That has nothing to do with the slaves that were there. Now, people, well, how about women? The same thing. Mixing women issues with black issues is like comparing a headache to cancer. It might be a headache being a woman at times, but it's cancerous being black. And a lot of black women can't understand that difference. They'll run out right now and say, I'm going with the sisterhood. I'm going to join all women in the world. And they don't understand that the issue is not with sisterhood or with women, it's with the race, and particularly with the black man. Racism started out with the black man, not with the black woman. Nobody wanted any black women in America as slaves. Get that through your heads. They didn't need any black women. Black women was too weak and they couldn't do the work. They just started importing black women into the United States as slaves until the late 1700s. You know why? When they found out by the early during the course of the 1800s that they were going to that they had 20 years in the Constitution from 1789 all the way up to about 1807 that slavery, importing slaves would end. You remember that? You could not bring in blacks from out of the country. So all of a sudden whites said, okay, I tell you what let's do. Since we can't bring in more slaves in because the Constitution said they had 25 years from 1709 to bring in slaves because it would end in 1807. Let's start breeding our own slaves. And let's take women now and use them as breeders so we can get free slaves off of women. And that's where the whole issue turned to women. But basically they wanted a black man as strong and big and burly as they can get him and working to death before he was 35 to 40 years of age. They want to work him to death until he died. Because they had no interest in taking care of him, giving him Social Security and medical benefits. And so stay away from that issue. The next issue is capitalism. Now, when racism started in the 1500s, and they started practicing racism, guess what happened? Capitalism started. Up to that time, the whole way of making money was mercantilism. And all of a sudden, they started getting these slaves who can generate all this wealth. By wealth, they figured they paid typically about $40 at most for a slave in this country. And I'm sorry, no, they paid about $25 for a slave off the coast of Africa. They spent about $40 to work him for a whole year. That's the maximum amount of money was spent on a slave. That's for his welfare. But they expect that slave to bring in about a 1,500% return for owning him. And so they're going to work him to death. And so they started things saying, so capitalism started. Now, what is capitalism? That started about 1509, probably about 7 or 8 years after commercialized slavery started in Europe. Capitalism started. That's what you're operating under right now, is capitalism. Now, what is capitalism? Capitalism means own and control the land, the tool, the resources, and use other people's labor to enrich yourselves. Now, if you all didn't hear it, let me repeat it again. Capitalism means own and control the land, the tools, and the resources, and use other people's labor to enrich yourself. That is capitalism. W.B. Du Bois defined capitalism a little different, but pretty close to the same thing in 1915. W.B. Du Bois says that capitalism is like having 3 to 4 ears of corn. You eat, you save, you sell, and use the other seeds for next year's planting. That is capitalism. Now, how many blacks you know that's eating, saving, and selling and planting? Did any of you in this auditorium now hear me say anything about that capitalism was social integration and civil rights? No. Then why do you keep practicing capitalism in a capitalist society looking for civil rights and social integration? You're at odds with the society you live in. You're at odds with it. You're swimming upstream. You're swimming upstream. You keep talking about socialism in a capitalist society. Nobody else is concerned about it. Even China and Russia now has become capitalistic. They're not trying to be socialistic anymore. They're looking for wealth and power and resources. Only people who want to practice socialism is black folk. We want to be able to look about civil rights and social integration. And so capitalism means owning and controlling those resources. And that's what my Powernomics stuff is about. We're going to learn how to own and control resources and power and wealth to take care of our own people. Immigration. Also understand immigration. That immigration is not your friend. In 1791, in the first immigration law and naturalization law, it stipulated that this is an immigrant nation. And there can be no black immigrants. That only Europeans can come here to be a white nation. That is, and the black people then are the only people in America that are non-immigrants. I'm telling you this so now when you start watching these politicians, they keep talking about what they're doing for immigrants. Immigrants are coming to this country to replace you, to supplant you, to get over you. They're not coming here to be your friend. You're looking for love in all the wrong places. They're not coming here to get along with you. They're coming here to get over you and above you and take you out. The National Hispanic Party told me that back in 1972 when they met out here in Kansas City. When one of my friends who's been with the Bay of Pigs from Cuba told me, he said, Dr. Ennis, he says, we're going to dominate starting by the year 2000. We're going to take black folk out. We're going to become the #1 minority in this country because black folk don't understand the issues. And they hit it right on the head. You're no longer #2 in this country, you're now #3. They passed you in population. And in about another 15 or 20 years, you're going to move from where you are now. You were the #2 population for almost 300, 400 years. Hispanics made you #3, third-class citizens. And when these Arabs and Asians get together, you're going to become fourth-class citizens. Because they're going to dominate and dictate over you. And that's why the Hispanic says that anything from now on in this country must come through them first before it goes to black folk. But yet you got all your leadership, all your political leadership, all your civil rights leaders are always talking about, we are people of color. Who are you talking about? Well, those are our brothers. No, they are not. Hispanics were classified as whites up to 1970. In the country right now, 99 7/10%, only 0.3% of people who speak Spanish in the United States are black. The other 99 7/10 are whites speaking Spanish. Right now, Hispanic is nothing but a white person speaking Spanish. And they're coming here getting benefits over you that should have been going to you. In this city, all these benefits they're getting for running for office, all these programs and everything, all this help that should have been going to blacks in the city of Los Angeles are going to them. They're getting it because you don't raise hell about it. You don't make an issue out of it. They're not entitled to those benefits, and it's illegal and unconstitutional because you go back to the 13th Amendment. It says very specifically that black folks must be treated in all manners similar to the way white folk are treated, or the white man is treated. Now, you're not being treated as whites are being treated when they come in and dominate over you. The slaughterhouse case in 1872 said the same thing when whites down in Louisiana tried to use the 14th Amendment. And the court says that whites cannot use the 14th Amendment. Hispanics are whites. They can't come in and say they're looking for due process. They want equal protection. They want affirmative action. You can't do it because the slaughterhouse case said it was illegal for anything but black folk. It's illegal. I don't see any blacks raising Cain about it. If you're going to march and demonstrate, that's what you should be raising Cain about. How is it all the things that were set aside for you is going to everybody else? You're sitting there sleeping. And the immigrants are coming in this country to take you over. That's why in all the progress that blacks got from the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Let me give you a better example there. Let's go back to the 1950s. In 1950, a black man with a black man with a college education could not earn as much, or he only could earn 50% of what a white high school dropout could earn. That's in 1950. By 1955, the income of a black person moved up 10% during the black civil rights movement. You moved up from 55% to 65%. By 1965, black people had picked up 10 points, from 55% to 65%. Then by 1970, when the Hispanics got classified as minorities and started getting into the affirmative action program, along with the Asians and the Eskimos and Filipinos and Samoans and American Indians and everybody, Koreans and Chinese and Japanese, everybody, guess what happened? Black folks slid back. You're back now to where you were in 1950 in the income ratio. You went backwards. They took it from you. They're going to take over all the jobs, the management jobs. They got special pressure programs in Washington where black folk demonstrated and raised Cain up until the 1960s just to get federal jobs. Now, guess what? The federal government going out soliciting, bringing in Hispanics and giving them equal job opportunities. All the things that you fought for to get, they get it free. Now, what we're going to do now is to understand this concept. Then we're going into Powernomics. Powernomics says we're now going to go for something that Anderson is pushing us towards. Powernomics. To power up for Powernomics. Now, here's the way the system works. You build your communities, black business communities, and the first thing you always focus on in your communities is economics. Economics, it is a 5-story building in Powernomics concept. So I put it in a concept where you can always remember this when I'm gone. So you'll never forget it. The first floor is always economics because racism is economics. Racism has nothing in the world to do with who you like or who you don't like. It has nothing to do with it. Only when they beat up on you now because they know you don't have any economics. You don't have a basis beneath you. When they drag you to shooting black folk, they're not shooting you because you're black. They're shooting you because of your social economic condition. You're powerless. They know the only thing you're going to do, they shoot 20 blacks tomorrow. Only thing you're going to do is go out and march. That's all you're going to do. They know that. You have no power and wealth. You build that business community and you build factories and industries in there. And you produce wealth and money and income. Then you take that wealth and money and income and you use it to benefit and lift your people. And you use it also to take the surplus capital and you go to the second floor in that 5-story building. On the second floor in that 5-story building, that's politics. That's politics. That's where your politicians are. Quit letting people mislead you about voting. Voting ain't worth a damn if you don't have an economy. I have run political campaigns for presidents, for governors, for attorney generals, for congressional people, for mayors and city council people. Politics, voting and politics ain't worth a quarter in voting if you don't have an economy. It's money that controls your politics. You take your money on that first floor and the Powerlessness concepts that I'm trying to get you all to buy into. You take that money off the first floor, you buy every politician on the second floor. Don't worry about voting, buy them. Be just like the mafia. Be like the mafia. Just buy them. If you can't, you don't have enough money to buy them, then rent or lease them for a while. You rent and lease him. Then you commission him and say, now on this second floor, now that I bought you, just like this next election, you can see all this money going into all these candidates, billions and millions of dollars.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I just hope that you're super great wherever you are today. I'll be sharing the full link to the video in my description so that you can also go and watch. One outstanding thing that I've learned from the video is that we black folks, we still need to do a lot. We still have a lot of doing when it comes to economics. We are not supporting each other. We are trying to compete with each other instead of supporting each other, while other communities are economically doing the same by not doing the same, but they're supporting each other economically. Now, while I was listening to the lecture, I made some notes in regards to this, and I felt like it's important to share what I've learned or to share my perspective or my take in this. As a presenter, my work is to show you this video and you tell me what you think about this in the comment section. Now, a couple of things that I learned while watching the video is that one of the most pressing reasons black people need to move as a bloc is that every other group in the society does so. That is white, Asian, Jewish, and Arab communities. They operate based on collective economic principles. They don't start with social, but economic principles. They own and control businesses in their neighborhoods, ensuring that money circulates multiple times before leaving their hands. In contrast, the black dollar leaves the black community within hours, meaning black people do not benefit from their own spending. This weak economic foundation leaves black people vulnerable to poverty, unemployment, and financial instability, reinforcing systemic disadvantages. Reinforcing these systemic disadvantages. And you understand how really this happens. And I think it's important for you to note that, because let me take a perspective for me as a continental African, and this is what I observe. For example, if we have local people setting up restaurants in a place, you'll find that most local people will go to these Asian hotels and leave the local hotels. Why? Because at the back of the mind, they believe that the other one is classy as compared to this. Yet you don't know that by purchasing or by keep on supporting this local restaurant, very soon it will beat the other restaurant. And this doesn't deviate so much from what's happening also in the United States. The black dollar doesn't circulate to the black community. It leaves within minutes. And this is a sad thing that I feel like it's important. And Dr. Cloud Anderson is trying to reinforce the importance of economic integration and why we need to put so much power, we need to put so much force in the economic integration more than any other thing. Because we black folks, we can pretend that we love each other. That's the social integration, that we love each other. We care so much about each other, but we don't support each other economically. I could be your friend, but I'm not going to buy from you. So it's crazy that these are amongst the loopholes that we need to we need to talk about, because at the end of the day, these are the things that are affecting black folks. Another thing that I'm also going to say that I saw Dr. Cloud Anderson trying to highlight is that without economic power, black people will continue to face oppression regardless of political or social advancement. Civil rights laws and affirmative action programs have not translated into long-term wealth creation for black communities. Instead, integration has allowed black resources to be absorbed into the larger economy, benefiting everyone except black people. For example, black consumers are amongst the biggest spenders in industries like beauty, fashion, and entertainment. Yet they do not own or control these industries. This means that despite having immense purchasing power, black people are still economically powerless. That's where his work comes, powernomics. Black people, we are still economically powerless. Agree or disagree, that's the truth. In as much as the research tries to show that we have the biggest consuming power in the industry of entertainment, fashion, also on vacations, but we are not doing the initiative of owning these factors, of looking what black people are doing this and how can we support them. You know, I think that's the mindset that a Dr. Cloud Anderson is trying to sell or is trying to explain it, right? So I think it's important to look at it in that perspective. Those are the things that are making black folks not progress. And these things are also affecting them economically. Systematic issues, systemic racism, all other things. We could have power as black folks if we start seeing these things differently. We start addressing these issues and finding solutions of how we can deal with these issues, right? Another thing that I also learned while watching the video is that the failure to bounce the black dollar within the black communities is a form of economic suicide. Yes, it is a form of economic suicide. If money is constantly flowing out of the community, there is little opportunity to create jobs, build business, or fund local institutions such as schools, hospitals, and media networks. This lack of economic control forces black people to rely on outsiders for employment, loans, and essential services. In turn, there are the mercy of discriminatory hiring practices, predatory lending, and educational systems that do not serve their interests. Until black people own and control the economic infrastructure, they will remain at disadvantage. And I think this is so important because most of within the black community, we're not having these resources. We're not owning all these factors of production that it is important. That's why you find that most of black schools are underfunded because there are no much business that are going within ourselves. So it is so hard to think or come up with a statutory plan that will work, that will make all these factors be in line, that will make all these factors work like great for black people. Because when the money is circulating within the area, what are the implications of this? One, there'll be employment. Employment will be there because when I have a business, person B have a business, definitely we'll need to employ people to work for us. Two, development projects like infrastructure will need to have good roads. Our kids will have to go to good schools, schools which are funded well, schools which have these infrastructures that most of black schools, I'm sorry to say, but they go through these challenges. So you see how all these affects the black community, especially when it comes to talking about things to do with growth, right? So I feel like it's important for black folks generally to do or make a consideration of thinking and seeing to it how people can move forward and how they can make this work, right? I'm also going to talk about owning resources and industries is crucial because economic power translates into political and social power. Many black leaders focuses solely on political representation, but without an economic base, political victories are often hollow. Other groups use their economic power to influence policies, fund candidates who support their interest, and protect their businesses from unfair regulations. Black people, on the other hand, often vote for politicians who do not prioritize their needs because they lack the financial influence to demand real change. Building a strong economic base would allow black communities to fund their own political movements and ensure their voices are heard. This is also important, right? While black leaders, we're trying to change the status quo, you go into politics. While you have missed an important point, before going into politics, make sure that you are representing your people, like economically. You have something on the ground, right? I think that's one of the most important things that should be put into consideration. We need to set industries in the areas that we stay. Before jumping into politics, we need to think about the economic situation because there is power. Owning resources is a source of power. Having factors of production is a source of power. So we need to think, we need to look at it in that different way for us to come and understand how all these things are affecting the black community. So with that being said, I hope all these factors have been put into consideration and that as a person who is trying to follow all these things that are happening, I hope that the commentaries that I'm giving are so much helpful to you and they give you a perspective that are giving value to what you think it's important. I'm also going to be addressing another critical point. Another critical aspect of black economic empowerment is controlling land and real estate. Controlling land and real estate. Do you know why this is important? Look at back in history. During those times, the enslavers or the colonizers didn't want black people to own land. Land is really, really important factor of production. Land is really, mark my words, land is really, really important factor of production. And what today a majority of people are investing in is the real estate. Another critical aspect of economic empowerment is controlling land and real estate. Historically, black communities that thrived, such as Tulsa Black Wall Street, were deliberately destroyed through violence or economic sabotage. Today, gentrification continues to displace black people from their own neighborhoods, making it harder to build wealth through property ownership. Land is fundamental source of power because it provides a foundation for business development, housing, and community stability. Without ownership of land, black people remain economically vulnerable, unable to pass down generational wealth or control their living conditions. Reasons as to why black folks were not able to pass down the economic wealth is that we had structures that was put that didn't want black folks to own this important factor of production that is land. If you don't have land, you don't have nothing to pass down because white folks have ancestral lands that they inherited. What did black folks add? Because even if we look at the Tulsa Wall Street, it was sabotaged. Black folks owned those places, but the Wall Street was put down. So what does this tell you? Owning land as a factor of production is so important to black people. And I think we need to start thinking in that line. If you can buy, if you can own land, it means that you have a source of wealth that increases with value over time. And you can pass it down to your kids. You can pass it down to other people who want to invest to other people who want to do something great in future, right? It's a measure of wealth. It's a source of wealth, and it goes generation to generation. You can pass it down like it doesn't exhaust. It's a natural resource. So owning land, I think that this is also important. I'm also going to be talking about what Dr. Anderson really stresses on. Dr. Claude Anderson stresses on the importance of creating strong Black-owned institutions, that is schools, banks, media outlets, and cultural centers, which must be controlled by Black people to ensure that Black interests are prioritized. Why schools? Why is banks? First, schools to teach real history, something that was whitewashed before, to let the kids go through the real curriculum, right? Because when the school is owned by Jewish people or white people, you know damn well that the history is going to be whitewashed. And even if you look at the South African apartheid, the land belonged to South Africans, but these people, since they owned these schools, they taught them their language, they taught them their history. They didn't want to say about Black achievements or those Black things. Why is Black banks important? Black people can get loans that they can use, right, to grow, to build business, to build wealth. Discriminatory lending that other banks are doing will now stop because we have Black banks that now offer even better interest to its community. Hope that sinks. Black people, to ensure that Black interests are prioritized. Right now, Black education is largely controlled by non-Black institutions that do not teach Black history, culture, or economic principles. Media representation is also dictated by non-Black entities, shaping negative narratives that influence public perception and self-identity. If Black people controlled their own education and media systems, they could change the way their communities are perceived and empower future generations with knowledge that benefit them. And I think I've explained that. It is so important for us to have our own history, to have our own story, to have the power of owning these factors of production, to have the power of setting up these infrastructures like school, so that we can teach our kids our history. We can teach our kids our true history, something that was taken away from us. And you can look at the side things that comes with this freedom of owning and controlling factors of production, right? Now, beyond economic reasons, there are these things that I want to address. Social integration without group cohesion has led to an identity crisis among Black people. Many Black individuals see themselves as individuals rather than part of large collective. This weakens community bonds and makes it easier for external forces to divide and exploit Black people. Other racial groups understand the importance of moving as a unit, and I think Dr. Claude Anderson has really emphasized on this. You need to move as a block. That's really important. Protecting their cultural heritage, ensuring their economic survival, Black people must adopt the same mindset, recognizing that their resources success is tied to the success of their community as a whole. That's really important. And for you to understand, or for you to have a sense of belonging, or for you to see that you belong to a given group, you need to put yourself in that position of seeing that you need to move as a block, because there are so many things that are so resonating We need to do together as people who share common interest, as people who share common history, as people who have collective goal. That's how it's important. And that's how I see it. So having these talks, I feel like it's important for us to, have all these discussions. They really matter. One of the biggest obstacles to achieving this level of unity is the psychological conditioning that has been that has been imposed on black people for centuries. Slavery, colonialism, and systemic racism have taught black people to distrust one another, to see success as an individual pursuit rather than a collective mission. This has led to competition instead of cooperation, envy instead of empowerment, fragmentation instead of unity. Dr. Anderson argues that reprogramming the black mindset is essential for breaking free from this cycle and creating a new reality where black people work together to build and protect their resources. Ultimately, Dr. Cloud Anderson's message is clear. Black people must take ownership of their own economic future if they want to survive and thrive in a world that does not prioritize their well-being. Moving as a block is not just a strategy for financial success. It is, sorry, a necessity for survival. Without economic power, black people will continue to be exploited, marginalized, and left vulnerable to systemic oppression. The only way forward is through unity, economic control, and a commitment of keeping wealth circulating within the black community. If these principles are embraced, black people can finally break free from economic dependence and build a future of true empowerment and independence. I hope this video finds you well wherever you are, and I hope you find values from the commentary that I give. These are presenter Agent Tech Stories. If you're watching this video for the first time and you reached at this point, kindly consider subscribing to the channel, join our membership, and really get to see what we can offer you. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.